Okay, guys, today we are going to talk a little bit more about food sensitivities. And this is a really important topic. So I want to start by distinguishing the difference between an allergy and a sensitivity. So when we have an allergy to something, a food allergy, that's actually referring to a histamine response. So something where you get like hives or a rash or difficulty breathing or swollen lips, like those are signs of an allergy. A food sensitivity is actually different. What you're getting with a food sensitivity is an inflammatory response. So it can look different in different people's bodies, and it kind of depends on your genetics and how you're going to respond. But that can be inflammation in the gut. It could be inflammation in the joints, which would manifest as painful joints. If it's in the gut, it might be constipation or diarrhea or bloating. It can also manifest as headaches and migraines, so that the inflammation is like traveling up to the head. It could be a combination of all of those things. So the science boils down to this, you guys. Certain foods are just loaded with potential harmful particles that are not digested well, and they can easily confuse and activate our immune cells. So when that happens, our body reads them as foreign instead of food. So there are common ones that are a big problem for most people or for a lot of people. And so those are the ones that you see us removing right out of the gate. Like they're not really in our meal plans, and we're talking about eliminating them. I'm going to go through the list and I'm going to explain to you why, a little bit later in this call or this talk. But, it's wheat, it's gluten, it's dairy, it's soy and eggs and sugar, like highly processed foods, okay? Then there are others that are unique to smaller populations. So really you could have a food sensitivity to anything. Like some people might be sensitive to apples, or they could be sensitive to eggplant, or, just any number of things. So part of what we're doing, part of the reason that I have you actually tracking how you feel while you're eating your meals, whether you're using your phone or the app that I recommended or keeping a food journal, is because those foods that might be triggering you can be really random and hard to identify if you are not looking for them and paying attention to it, okay? So inflammation is actually a protection mechanism in our body. When our body's irritated, it has one way to respond. It gets inflamed. It sends chemical messengers to attack whatever is causing the inflammation. So think about like when you get a cut, it gets like a little bit red and swollen around the cut while it's healing. But then it heals and it goes away, and the inflammation goes away with it. But what happens when we are constantly taking in something that we are sensitive to, unbeknownst to us, we are keeping our body in a constant state of inflammation, because every time we take that in, the inflammation gets re-aggravated and it never has a chance to cool off and calm down. So our bodies are basically going to war, fighting a battle every single time we eat. And the gut never has an opportunity to heal, never has an opportunity to chill out. And over time, that creates wear and tear. And small holes start to form in the gut lining, which, as I've mentioned, is only one cell thick. And that's when you get leaky gut. And it becomes a cyclical problem, because once you have that and food particles and other things that are meant to stay in our gut start to leak out into our bodies, that creates more inflammation. And then that can create more food sensitivities, because our immune system is triggered and it's confused and it's getting all off, and it just becomes a never-ending cycle. And so that's why when we don't stop and heal the gut, and we don't stop and get rid of the food sensitivities, remove those triggers from our diets, then the symptoms get worse and worse and worse over time. The inflammation builds, and we start reacting to more things. So holistic doctors who are paying attention to nutrition and the significant connection between our gut, which I like to call our second brain, and the rest of our bodies, they're noting that almost 80% or more of us are now suffering from some level or some degree of leaky gut syndrome, you guys. 80% of us. And that number is just going to keep growing, and the symptoms are going to keep getting worse if we don't learn how to give our guts some tender, loving care. Food is powerful stuff. So it can either be an instigator of discomfort and disease, or it could be the cure for both of those things. So what I want to help you do is turn your food from a trigger of discomfort to a healer. So when you eat processed foods, things with food additives, chemicals, artificial sweeteners, high fructose corn syrup, and other inflammatory foods, you actually create a toxic, irritated environment in your gut and in your body. These are food substances that inflame the intestinal tract, which then it starts to kind of simmer like a hotbed of coals. And then you continue to eat those same foods. And the fire or the inflammation spreads throughout your whole body. And it creates system-wide inflammation. So that's when we see people having things like allergies, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, sleep issues, reflux, intestinal conditions, even anxiety and depression. Also headaches, low libido, bloating, joint pain. All of these things are because of system-wide inflammation. So let's define food intolerance or food sensitivity a little bit more. I want to help you guys understand and figure out how to really heal your body. So intolerances are usually due to our body not being able to process a component of a particular food. So for instance, one of the most common intolerances is dairy or lactose, a lactose intolerance. And this is present when someone lacks an adequate amount of the enzyme lactase. And we need lactase, which is produced on the surface of your intestinal cells, to break down lactose, which is a sugar that's found in milk and milk products. But here's the problem. 60 to 75% of us don't have enough lactase after the age of 4 to adequately digest lactose found in milk products. So when you can't process a type of food, it's an indication that you're lacking an enzyme, nutrient, or an organism that is required to properly digest or metabolize that substance. So that means that each time you eat that food, more of the undigested particles are building up. That's doing things like feeding organisms that live in your intestinal tract that we don't want to feed, such as bacteria, certain bacteria, the bad ones, and yeast, and producing other harmful effects like inflammation. So that's also why you see that gentle detoxing and cleansing are part of our healing process, because we need to give our body some support in flushing out that buildup that's been happening. So this is how powerful our food is, you guys. Within 72 hours of changing your diet, you change the ecology in your gut, the microbiome. It's just 72 hours. So you guys could be feeling the positive effects of this new nutrition plan in as little as a few days, okay? And if you're not, that's okay. The longer you stay on it, the more positive benefits you're going to feel. For some of us, if the damage is significant, if we haven't identified the foods that we're sensitive to yet, or if there's still others that we need to eliminate, it may take a little bit more time. And that's okay. We're going to figure it out together. But a study in the Journal of Clinical Allergy actually revealed that 90% of rheumatoid arthritis patients saw a reduction of symptoms when they eliminated grains, nuts, milk, beef, and eggs from their diet. So it just goes to show that certain foods are such a trigger. And when we eliminate them, we can get massive amounts of healing. So that is what our goal is. And so a lot of people are going to say, well, why aren't we just doing a food sensitivity test? And food sensitivity tests can be helpful, but there's a few things to consider. One, they take time. Two, they're pretty expensive. They're more expensive than this entire course, which is teaching you so much more than just what foods you're sensitive to. Also, they can have false negatives and false positives. So it's not completely accurate. So the most accurate way to identify the foods that are triggering you is an elimination diet. And so that is what we're doing. We're eliminating the most common for everybody right out of the gate. Then, once we do that, we're tracking what we're eating and how it's making us feel so we can start to identify if there are other triggers. But let's talk about the big ones that we've eliminated already as a whole. So gluten. It's one of the most inflammatory ingredients of the modern era, you guys. And yes, we've been eating it for hundreds of years, but today it's highly modified and it often contains 40% more gluten than it actually did in the past. So it's a huge trigger. We know it's a huge trigger. We're going to eliminate gluten and wheat. So make sure you're reading your food labels too, because especially if you've got packaged things, even lunch meat, you guys, is injected with gluten. So you got to read labels. If it's not a whole food, then read the label and look for gluten, okay? Number 2, dairy. It's extremely difficult for many people to process and digest dairy, like I just explained, because of the lactose intolerance, especially if you're over the age of 4. The protein particles are too large for our digestive system, but also dairy is highly addictive, you guys. Like, actually proven scientifically that it's addictive. It actually contains a morphine-like compound that interacts with opiate receptors in the brain, so the more we eat it, the more we want it. So I get that dairy is a tough one to give up. It's why I give you other substitutions for it. We have, nut cheeses and recipes for nut cheeses, and there's coconut milk and almond milk, hemp milk, all these things that you can use in your recipes and in your day-to-day life. We can substitute them for cheese and wean you off of it, wean you off the dairy, and I promise you it's going to help you feel so much better. And then there's sugar. We all know it's inflammatory and should be consumed in extreme moderation. I think the recommended max level is 6 to 7 teaspoons a day for an adult and 4 for a child. And on average, most of us are consuming about 20 teaspoons a day. So we really need to get our sugar levels in check. So that's why you see me eliminating processed foods, giving you super clean, healthy snack and like dessert treat ideas. So you're having things that are sweet and satisfy those sweet cravings, but they're not spiking your inflammation levels, okay? So really, to reduce our dependence on sugar, a lot of times we're turning to artificial sweeteners, and science has proven that they're impacting our gut bacteria in an extremely negative manner. They're causing metabolic syndrome, which is a broad term for all kinds of diseases from anxiety to fibromyalgia. So the foods have to go if you want to heal your gut. The foods that we just mentioned. Like the dairy's got to go, the gluten's got to go, the processed foods got to go, artificial sweeteners definitely got to go. So if you remove these and you continue to struggle, then that's where the elimination diet goes a step further. So we're also looking at potentially removing eggs and soy. And then if those are still bothering you, we look at other grains. And then we can look, it can be caffeine. It might be nuts. For some people, it's garlic and onions. So these are all things that we're going to pay attention to over the course of this 30 days. And the good news is, at the end of the 30 days, I am going to walk you guys through how to start adding some of these foods back into your diet so you can see how your body responds to them and how you respond once they've been removed for 30 days. So you guys have to stick to your nutrition plans because this is part of your food sensitivity testing, basically. Once you've had them removed for 30 days, when we add them back in and see how your body responds, that is going to be the true test for knowing if it's something that you can have as part of your healthy lifestyle or if it's something that you need to leave out in order to live your healthiest, happiest, best life, okay? Some other tips that will help support your body in gently detoxing and also being nourished are to opt for organic and non-GMO when possible, okay? And then we're also reducing our dependence on animal products by adopting a plant-based diet. So in my next video to you guys, I'm going to talk to you about why plant-based and also help you understand that that doesn't necessarily mean vegan or vegetarian. It just means that we're eating a plant-heavy diet, okay? So by working on our gut health, we can begin to heal and bring balance back to our mood, back to our life, back to, just everything that we do. How our gut feels is how we feel, you guys. So be aware, pay attention to how you're feeling before you eat, pay attention to how you're feeling after you're eating. Note what foods you're eating. So keep those food meal plans on hand. Make little notes as you go throughout the day. It's going to be reflecting back on each week's meals and how you felt after you ate them, 10 minutes after, 30 minutes after, an hour after. If a symptom pops up, go back and note it so you can try and start to make those connections. So I hope this information was helpful for you guys. If you have additional questions about foods you might need to eliminate, how your body's responding to them, about food sensitivities, pop into our group on Facebook. Let me know what your questions are, and I look forward to talking with you guys more about this throughout the next 30 days.